I'm Amy, and I'm 28 years old. 3 months after my father's funeral, my mother showed up at my apartment door with my 17-year-old brother, Danny, 2 garbage bags of his clothes, and said the words that would change everything. "He's your burden now." She was talking about $800 a month in disability benefits that I had no idea she'd been collecting for him. I didn't scream. I didn't break down. I took a deep breath and watched her walk back to her car like she was dropping off dry cleaning. What I didn't know was that she'd already planned to keep collecting those benefits while I struggled to figure out how to care for Danny alone. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt completely blindsided by family betrayal. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Danny stood in my doorway, rocking slightly back and forth, his eyes fixed on the ground. He hadn't spoken since Dad died. Danny was autistic and mostly nonverbal, though he used to hum jingles from TV commercials under his breath. Even that had stopped after the funeral. "Come on in, Danny," I said softly, stepping aside. He shuffled past me, still clutching his favorite stuffed elephant that Dad had bought him years ago. The elephant was threadbare now, missing one button eye, but Danny never went anywhere without it. My apartment wasn't big. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a tiny kitchen that barely fit 2 people. I'd bought it with my inheritance after Dad died, the small portion that came to me while Mom got the house and everything else, including Danny's share since she was his legal guardian. I guided him to the couch, where he immediately sat in the corner and began his routine of arranging and rearranging the throw pillows. Always in the same order, always precise. It was one of his comfort behaviors, something that helped him feel safe in new environments. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. "His medication schedule is in the bag. His school pickup is at 3 p.m. daily. Good luck." That was it. No explanation about how I was supposed to manage a full-time job while driving Danny to and from his special needs school every day. No discussion about what came next. No consideration for the fact that I'd never taken care of someone with Danny's needs for more than a weekend. I sat down across from him and really looked at my brother for the first time in months. He was thinner than I remembered. There was a faded yellow bruise on his forearm that I hadn't noticed before. When I asked him about it, he just stared at his hands and started humming very quietly the first sound I'd heard him make all day. The reality hit me like a freight train. I had no idea how to do this. Danny needed structure, routine, specialized care that I couldn't provide while working 40 hours a week. I started making mental calculations of everything that would need to change. His school transportation alone would require me to rearrange my entire work schedule. His medications cost $300 monthly. Then there was food, clothing, and constant supervision. I pulled out my laptop and started researching. Support groups, government assistance programs, anything that might help me understand what I'd just inherited. That's when I found the first piece of information that made my stomach drop. Danny was still listed as living with Mom at her address. All his benefits, all his support services, everything was still going to her house, the house where he no longer lived. I called the Disability Services office thinking it was just a paperwork error. "Ma'am, we can't change his address without written consent from his legal guardian," the woman on the phone explained. "I'm his sister. He's living with me now. According to our records, his mother is still his guardian and primary caregiver. If there's been a change, she'll need to file the proper forms." I hung up and stared at my phone. Mom hadn't just abandoned Danny. She'd made sure to keep control of his benefits while dumping the actual responsibility on me. Danny looked up from his pillow arrangement and caught my eye for just a second before looking away again. In that brief moment, I saw something that made my chest tighten. He looked scared. Not just confused or overwhelmed, but genuinely frightened. I moved to sit beside him on the couch, careful not to disturb his careful pillow configuration. "Hey, buddy," I said quietly. "You're safe here. I'm going to figure this out." He reached for my hand, something he rarely did with anyone except Dad. His fingers were cold and trembling slightly. That night, after I'd helped Danny through his bedtime routine and settled him in my bedroom while I took the couch, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. 3 months. Mom had waited 3 months after Dad's death to dump this on me. I thought about Dad's funeral, how Mom had seemed so composed, so in control. She'd handled all the arrangements, accepted condolences gracefully, played the grieving widow perfectly. Now I realized it had all been performance. She'd been planning her escape from responsibility the entire time. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Mom. "Don't call me unless it's an emergency." I set the phone aside and listened to Danny's soft breathing from the bedroom. Tomorrow I'd have to figure out how to get him to school, pick him up, manage his afternoon routine, and somehow maintain my job. But tonight I made a decision that would change both our lives. Whatever it took, however long it took, I was going to make sure Danny felt safe and loved. And if Mom thought she could just walk away while keeping his benefits, she had seriously underestimated me. I didn't know it yet, But Mom's abandonment of Danny wasn't just cruelty. It was calculated fraud that would eventually catch up with her in ways she never imagined. The first week was a disaster. I burned through 3 sick days trying to establish a routine with Danny while frantically calling every disability service in the county. Each conversation ended the same way. Without Mom's signature, I couldn't access anything. My work supervisor, Janet, called me into her office Thursday morning. "Amy, I understand you're dealing with a family situation, but we need to discuss your schedule changes." I explained about Danny's school pickup requirements and his need for supervision. The special needs school required family pickup, no bus service. "Look, I sympathize, but you can't leave at 2:30 every day indefinitely. We need to find a solution." The solution, apparently, was burning through my vacation days to cover early departures. I'd also need to figure out what would happen when Danny aged out of the school system in a few months when he turned 18. Danny had a meltdown on Tuesday when I tried to take him grocery shopping after school. The fluorescent lights were too bright, the sounds too overwhelming. He dropped to the floor in the cereal aisle and started hitting his head with his fists. Other shoppers stared like we were some kind of spectacle. I knelt beside him, speaking in the calm voice Dad had taught me to use during episodes like this. "It's okay, Danny. Let's count together. 1, 2, 3. By the time we got home, I was exhausted and Danny was completely shut down for the rest of the day. Thursday brought another crisis. Danny's medication was running low and the pharmacy wouldn't release a refill without updated insurance information that was still tied to Mom's account. I tried calling her. Straight to voicemail. I tried texting. No response. I drove to her house that evening after settling Danny with his homework. The lights were on, her car was in the driveway, but she wouldn't answer the door. I could see her moving around inside through the front window. Standing on her porch, knocking on a door that would never open, I felt something shift inside me. The desperation was starting to turn into something else, something harder. By Friday, I'd figured out a temporary solution. My insurance could cover Danny's medications as a dependent, but it would take weeks to process. I paid out of pocket at the pharmacy, $237 that I couldn't really afford. The pharmacist, an older woman with kind eyes, noticed my hand shaking as I signed the receipt. "Tough week?" she asked. "You could say that." I managed a weak smile. "My brother's been staying with me, and getting his care transferred has been complicated." She leaned across the counter slightly. "If you don't mind me asking, is someone making this more difficult than it needs to be?" I looked at her, surprised by the directness of the question. "Because I see this sometimes," she continued. "Family members who create obstacles when they shouldn't. If someone's preventing you from accessing care for a dependent, there are people who can help." She handed me a business card along with Danny's medication. "Jennifer Martinez, Family Advocacy Services. She's helped other families navigate these situations." That weekend, I called Jennifer. She listened to my story without interrupting, taking notes as I explained the situation. When I finished, there was a long pause. "Amy," she said finally, "what your mother is doing has a name. It's called caregiver fraud, and it's more common than you might think." "Fraud?" "She's accepting government benefits intended for Danny's care while not actually providing that care. That's illegal. And if she's preventing you from accessing services he needs, that could constitute neglect by proxy." I felt my hands start to shake again, but this time it wasn't from stress. It was from anger. "What can I do?" "Document everything. Every text, every phone call, every expense you're covering that should be coming from his benefits. We're going to need to build a case to transfer guardianship and benefits to you." "How long will that take?" "It's a process, but Amy, there's something else you should know. If your mother is receiving benefits for Danny while he's not in her care, she's likely getting more money than just disability payments. There could be food assistance, medical coverage, housing supplements. We're probably talking about $1,500 a month." I hung up feeling like the ground had shifted beneath my feet. $1,500. While I was draining my savings to buy Danny's medications and rearranging my entire life to provide basic care. That night, I sat with Danny as he arranged his art supplies for the 100th time. It was a new routine he'd developed, and I noticed he was starting to hum again, just barely audible. But it was progress. "Danny," I said quietly, "did Mom ever hurt you?" He stopped moving, his hands frozen on a blue crayon. "You can tell me. You're safe now." He looked at me for a long moment, then slowly rolled up his sleeve. There were 3 small bruises on his forearm, finger-shaped marks that made my stomach turn. Then, so quietly I almost missed it, he hummed the jingle from a car commercial. It was the first real sound he'd made since arriving. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "And thank you for making sounds again. That won't happen here." He nodded and went back to his crayons. But something had changed. He was starting to trust me. Later that night, I started a notebook. Every detail I could remember about Danny's condition when Mom dropped him off, the bruises, his weight loss, his complete silence that was slowly breaking. Jennifer Martinez had told me to document everything. I was just getting started. The next morning brought an unexpected gift. Danny hummed the McDonald's jingle while eating breakfast. It wasn't speech, but it was communication. It was hope. It also strengthened my resolve. Mom had hurt him, neglected him, and was profiting from his disability while I struggled to provide basic care. She'd made a mistake when she chose me as Danny's dumping ground. I wasn't going to just accept this situation. I was going to fight back. 2 weeks into our new arrangement, I made a discovery that changed everything. I was helping Danny organize his clothes when I found an envelope tucked into one of his jacket pockets. Inside were medical appointment cards and benefit statements that Mom had apparently forgotten to remove. The numbers made my blood run cold. Danny's monthly disability payment, $812. Food assistance, $416. Medical benefits that covered all his therapy and medications. Housing assistance because she claimed him as a dependent, $300 monthly reduction in her rent. She was collecting over $1,500 a month for a child who wasn't even living with her. But that wasn't the worst part. The appointment cards showed regular visits to a behavioral specialist, someone named Dr. Chen, who I'd never heard of. The last appointment was scheduled for 2 days ago. Danny had missed it because he was with me, and I had no idea it existed. I called Dr. Chen's office immediately. "I'm calling about Danny Morrison's missed appointment," I told the receptionist. "Oh yes, his mother called to reschedule. She said he was going through a difficult transition and needed to skip a few sessions." My hands gripped the phone tighter. "When did she call?" "Let me check." "It was the day before his appointment." She seemed very concerned about his adjustment to a new living situation. Mom had known Danny would miss his appointment because she'd dumped him with me, but instead of transferring his care, she'd made excuses to keep his services active under her name. "I need to speak with Dr. Chen," I said. "I'm Danny's sister, and there's been a change in his living situation. I'm sorry, but we can only discuss patient information with the guardian on file. That would be his mother." After I hung up, I sat staring at the appointment cards spread across my kitchen table. Speech therapy, occupational therapy, behavioral counseling. Danny had been receiving comprehensive care that I knew nothing about. Care that he was no longer getting because Mom wanted to maintain control of his benefits. I called Jennifer Martinez again. "This is huge," she said when I explained what I'd found. "Document everything. Take photos of the statements, the appointment cards, everything. This proves intent to defraud." "What does that mean?" "It means your mother isn't just making a mistake or being difficult. She's actively concealing information to continue collecting benefits fraudulently. This changes our approach completely." That afternoon, I took Danny to a walk-in clinic. I told the doctor I was concerned about some bruising I'd noticed and wanted to make sure he was healthy. Dr. Williams was thorough and patient with Danny, explaining each step of the examination in simple terms. When he was finished, he asked to speak with me privately. "Your brother is underweight for his age and height," he said. "Not dangerously so, but enough to be concerning. And those bruises on his arms appear to be from grip marks. How long has he been in your care?" 2 weeks. "Has he been eating better since the transition?" I thought about it. Danny had been hesitant about food at first, but his appetite was definitely improving. And he'd started humming commercial jingles during meals, a sign that he was feeling more comfortable. "Yes, actually, much better." Dr. Williams made notes in Danny's file. "I'd like to see him again in a month to track his weight gain. And Amy, I have to ask, was he being adequately cared for in his previous living situation?" The question hung in the air between us. I knew what he was really asking. "I don't think so," I said quietly. He nodded grimly. "If you need documentation of his current condition for any legal proceedings, this examination will be on file." That evening, I sat down with my laptop and started researching benefit fraud. What I learned made me sick. Caregiver fraud costs the government millions of dollars every year. But more importantly, it often leaves vulnerable individuals without the care they need while someone else profits from their disability. Danny was a victim of financial abuse, and I'd been so focused on figuring out how to care for him that I'd almost missed the bigger picture. I started a new document on my computer, a timeline of everything that had happened since Dad's death. Every conversation with Mom, every missed appointment, every dollar I'd spent that should have been covered by Danny's benefits. Jennifer Martinez had told me to build a case. I was going to build an airtight one. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted was betraying you in the worst possible way? Because what I found next made me realize that Mom's abandonment of Danny was just the beginning of her deception. Around 10 that night, I decided to do something I probably should have done weeks ago. I drove to Mom's house. Her lights were on, and through the window I could see her watching television in the living room that used to be Danny's safe space. She looked relaxed, comfortable. like she didn't have a care in the world. I sat in my car across the street and watched her for 20 minutes. At one point, she got up and moved to the kitchen, where I could see her talking on the phone and laughing. She was living her normal life while Danny struggled with the trauma of losing his father and being abandoned by his mother, while I drained my savings to provide basic care that his benefits should have covered, while he missed therapy appointments that could help him process his grief and adjust to his new living situation. But as I watched her carefree evening, I realized something important. Mom hadn't just made a desperate mistake in her grief. She'd calculated this. She'd planned to keep the money while dumping the responsibility. She'd chosen freedom over her son's well-being. I drove home that night with a new understanding of exactly who my mother really was, and for the first time since this whole mess started, I had a plan. Danny was humming the Kit Kat jingle when I walked in the door, and that small sound of contentment made my decision crystal clear. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. I was at Danny's new pediatrician appointment, his first real checkup since moving in with me, when Dr. Peterson asked a question that opened a door I didn't know existed. "Amy, have you considered applying for emergency guardianship?" I looked up from the forms I was filling out. "What's that?" "In cases where a dependent's welfare is at risk due to neglect or abandonment, the courts can expedite guardianship transfers. It's designed for situations exactly like yours." She explained that if I could demonstrate that Danny's current guardian was failing to provide adequate care, I could petition for temporary emergency guardianship while pursuing permanent custody. "The process moves much faster than standard guardianship cases," she said. "And once you have emergency guardianship, you can immediately access all his benefits and services." I felt something shift in my chest. Hope, maybe. Or just relief that there was actually a path forward. What kind of evidence would I need? Dr. Peterson was quiet for a moment, then pulled out Danny's file. His medical records show missed appointments, delayed medication refills, and concerning weight loss over the past few months. Combined with the physical evidence of grip marks and his documented regression in communication, you'd have a strong case. That afternoon, I called the family court clerk's office. The woman who answered, Mrs. Garcia, walked me through the emergency guardianship process. "You'll need to file a petition with supporting documentation," she explained. "Medical records, evidence of abandonment, proof that you're providing care. There's a filing fee of $250, and you'll need to serve notice to the current guardian." "Serve notice?" "Legal papers have to be delivered to your mother informing her of the petition. She'll have the right to contest it." My stomach dropped. What if she contests it? Then it goes to a hearing where both sides present their evidence. But honey, if what you're describing is accurate, emergency guardianship cases like this usually go in favor of the person actually providing care. I hung up, feeling simultaneously energized and terrified. This was real. I was about to take legal action against my own mother. That evening, I called my best friend from college, Lisa. She'd become a family law attorney and had always been someone I could count on for honest advice. "Amy, what you're describing sounds like a clear case for emergency guardianship," she said after I explained the situation. "And the benefit fraud aspect makes it even stronger. Lisa, I can't afford a lawyer for this." There was a pause. "Amy, what if I told you that you don't need to worry about that?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm going to represent you, pro bono. This case, it's exactly why I became a family attorney." I felt tears prick my eyes. "Lisa, I can't ask you to do that." "You're not asking. I'm offering. Danny deserves better than what he's gotten, and you deserve support for doing the right thing." That night, I sat Danny down for a conversation I'd been dreading. "Danny, you know how you've been living with me instead of Mom?" He nodded, not looking up from his puzzle. But I noticed he was humming the jingle from a cereal commercial under his breath, a new development that meant he was feeling more secure. "I want to make that official, so you can see your doctors again and get all the help you need. But it means there might be some difficult conversations with Mom." Danny stopped working on his puzzle and looked at me directly. "She won't like that." "No, she probably won't. Are you okay with that?" He was quiet for a long time, then said something that broke my heart. "She was angry all the time after Daddy died." "You're not angry." I had to turn away so he wouldn't see my face. How had I missed how bad things had gotten for him? "I promise you, Danny, I will never be angry at you for being yourself." That night, I started filling out the emergency guardianship petition with Lisa's guidance over the phone. Each section forced me to confront the reality of what Mom had done: abandonment, neglect, fraud. By morning, I had a 20-page document detailing Danny's situation, complete with medical records, photographs of his bruises, bank statements showing my out-of-pocket expenses, and a timeline of Mom's refusal to cooperate with his care. Lisa reviewed it before I submitted it. "This is thorough," she said. "Really thorough. You've documented everything perfectly. What happens next? You file it with the court, Pay the fee and request expedited review due to ongoing neglect. Then a process server delivers copies to your mother and she has 5 days to respond. 5 days? Emergency guardianship moves fast. If she doesn't contest it, you could have temporary custody within 2 weeks. If she does contest it, the hearing will be scheduled quickly. I took a deep breath. What are the chances she'll contest it? Lisa was quiet for a moment. Amy, your mother is collecting over $1,500 a month in benefits for Danny. Even if she doesn't want the responsibility of caring for him, she's not going to give up that income easily. That afternoon, I drove to the courthouse and filed the petition. The clerk stamped it with an official seal and handed me a case number. Case 2024 EG 4471. Danny Morrison Emergency Guardianship Petition. It felt surreal. I was officially challenging my mother's right to make decisions for my brother. The process server would deliver the papers to Mom within 48 hours. After that, there would be no going back. Danny was in his room when I got home, humming the State Farm jingle while arranging his art supplies in precise rows. It was a routine that helped him feel in control when everything else was uncertain. I sat on his bed and watched him work. His movements were careful and deliberate, each crayon placed exactly where it belonged. Danny, I said quietly, things are going to change soon. Some of it might be scary, but it's all going to help make sure you're safe and have everything you need. He lined up his last crayon and turned to look at me. Will I stay here with you? If that's what you want, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that happens. He nodded solemnly, then did something that melted my heart. He started humming Happy Birthday not because it was anyone's birthday, but because it was the first complex song he'd attempted since Dad died. Danny was healing. Whatever happened next, I was fighting for someone who deserved to be protected and loved. Mom was about to find out that abandoning Danny was the biggest mistake she'd ever made. The papers were served on a Tuesday. I know because Mom called me exactly 37 minutes later, and I've never heard her voice that angry. How dare you? She hissed into the phone. How dare you try to take him away from me? I was at work, so I stepped into an empty conference room and closed the door. I'm not taking him away from you, Mom. You gave him to me, remember? He's your burden now? That was temporary. I never said it was permanent. Really? Because you haven't returned a single phone call or text in 3 weeks. You've made it impossible for me to access his medical care or benefits. That doesn't sound temporary to me. There was a pause, and when she spoke again, her voice had changed. Less angry, more calculating. Amy, you don't understand what you're doing. Caring for Danny is more complicated than you realize. He needs specialized care that you can't provide. Then why haven't you provided it? When's the last time he saw a doctor? Chen? When's the last time he had speech therapy? Another pause. We can work this out. You don't need to involve the courts. We could have worked it out 3 weeks ago if you'd answered your phone. I was dealing with your father's estate. There were complications. I almost laughed. Complications that prevented you from taking Danny to his appointments? Complications that made it impossible to transfer his insurance information so I could get his medications? Amy, if you drop this petition, we can arrange something that works for both of us. There it was. The negotiation phase. I'd been expecting this. What did you have in mind? You keep caring for him, but I maintain guardianship. That way all his services stay active and you get help with the financial burden. Help how? I could contribute to his expenses. I sat down heavily in one of the conference room chairs. She wanted to keep collecting his benefits while I did all the work, and throw me occasional scraps to keep me quiet. How much were you thinking? Maybe $200 a month? That would help with groceries and things. 200 out of 1,500. And I'd bet anything that contribution would mysteriously stop after a few months. I'll think about it, I said, knowing I wouldn't. Amy, I'm his mother. I love him. I needed some freedom after your father died. I felt trapped taking care of Danny every day, driving him to school, managing his appointments. I needed space to figure out my own life. There it was. The real truth. Not grief, not being overwhelmed. She'd wanted freedom from the responsibility of caring for her disabled son. Mom, when I found Danny, he was underweight and had bruises on his arms. That's not needing space. That's neglect. The line went quiet for so long I thought she'd hung up. Those bruises were from him hitting himself during meltdowns. You know how he gets when he's upset. They were finger marks, Mom. Grip marks. You're imagining things. And there it was. Denial, deflection, gaslighting. The same pattern I'd seen my whole life whenever Mom was confronted with something she didn't want to face. I have to get back to work, I said. You have 5 days to file a response if you want to contest the petition. Amy, please don't do this to our family. I hung up before I said something I'd regret. That evening, I told Danny about the conversation. Mom called today. She's not happy about the court papers. Danny looked up from his dinner. Is she going to come get me? The fear in his voice made my decision crystal clear. No, Danny. She's not going to take you anywhere you don't want to go. I promise. He nodded and went back to eating, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. As if to reassure himself, he started humming the Oscar Mayer jingle very quietly. 3 days later, the court clerk called. Ms. Morrison, this is Mrs. Garcia from Family Court. Your mother has filed a response contesting the emergency guardianship petition. My heart sank. What does that mean? It means we'll need to schedule a hearing. Both parties will present their cases and the judge will make a decision. Can you be available next Friday at 2 p.m.? Yes. You'll want to bring all your supporting documentation and any witnesses who can testify about your brother's care and well-being. After I hung up, I called Lisa. She's contesting it, I told her. I figured she would. Are you ready for this? I don't know. What happens at the hearing? You'll present your evidence. She'll present hers. The judge will probably want to interview Danny if he's capable of expressing his preferences. What would she argue? How can she possibly justify what she's done? She'll probably claim that placing Danny with you was always intended as a temporary arrangement while she dealt with your father's death. She'll say she was planning to resume care and that you're interfering with her parental rights. But the benefits fraud, that's harder for her to explain. If you can prove she continued collecting benefits while not providing care, that significantly weakens her position. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Danny's question. Is she going to come get me? I got up and checked on him. He was sleeping peacefully, his stuffed elephant tucked under his arm. Even in sleep, I could hear him humming softly the Toys R Us jingle that he'd been working on all week. For the first time since this started, I allowed myself to really consider what would happen if I lost. Danny would go back to Mom's house, back to isolation, missed appointments, and whatever had caused those bruises. The progress he'd made, the way he'd started humming again, eating better, trusting me, all of that would disappear. I couldn't let that happen. I went to my computer and started making a list of everyone who could testify about Danny's condition and improvement. Dr. Peterson, who'd documented his weight gain. Dr. Williams, who'd noted the bruises. Jennifer Martinez, who could explain the benefit fraud. And Danny himself. If the judge wanted to know what he preferred, Danny was old enough and capable enough to express his own wishes, even if he did it through humming instead of words. Mom thought she could waltz into court and claim this was all a misunderstanding. She thought I'd back down rather than fight her publicly. She was about to learn that she'd underestimated me completely. What do you think will happen next? Drop your predictions in the comments because this hearing was about to expose more than just Mom's neglect of Danny. The week before the hearing, something remarkable happened. Danny started singing actual words. It began with commercial jingles he'd been humming for weeks, but suddenly he was mouthing the lyrics. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. I'm loving it. The best part of waking up is Folgers in your cup. It was during our evening routine I was helping him organize his art supplies when he dropped a crayon and it rolled under the bed. Instead of getting upset like he usually did when things weren't perfect, he looked at me and clearly sang, "Nationwide is on your side." I stared at him. "Danny, did you just sing that on purpose?" He giggled, actually giggled, and nodded. "It's hiding," he said, pointing to the crayon. Clear words, not humming. I got down on my hands and knees to retrieve the crayon, making exaggerated searching sounds. "Where did it go? I can't find it anywhere." Danny laughed harder. "It's right there." The words came easier now, like a dam had broken. When I emerged with the crayon, dramatically triumphant, he was fully laughing and singing the Kit Kat jingle. Give me a break, break me off a piece of that Kit Kat bar." I realized I hadn't heard him laugh since before Dad died. But more than that, I hadn't heard him speak in complete sentences since the funeral. The transformation was visible in other ways, too. He'd gained 8 pounds in the past month. His eyes were brighter. He was sleeping through the night instead of waking up from anxiety-driven nightmares. Dr. Peterson had been right to document his progress. Anyone could see that Danny was thriving. I started taking photos and videos of our daily routines. Danny eating breakfast without prompting, Danny singing commercial jingles while doing his homework, Danny playing with art supplies instead of just arranging them obsessively. "Why are you taking pictures?" he asked one morning, his words clearer than they'd been in months. "Because you're doing so well, and I want to remember these moments." He nodded seriously. For the judge, Danny understood more about the situation than I'd given him credit for. Partly, yes. But mostly because I'm proud of how brave you've been. "I like singing again," he said simply. "It makes me feel happy." The night before the hearing, I laid out my best professional outfit and organized all my documentation into clearly labeled folders. Medical records, bank statements, photographs, timeline of events. Everything that proved Danny was better off with me. Lisa had prepared me for Mom's likely arguments. She'd claim this was always temporary. She'd say I'd misunderstood her intentions. She'd probably present herself as a grieving widow who'd been overwhelmed and needed time to heal. What she couldn't explain away was the money. I'd done the math. In the 3 months since Dad's death, Mom had collected over $4,500 in benefits for Danny while providing zero care. That wasn't grief. That was calculated fraud. The morning of the hearing, I dropped Danny off with my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, an older woman who'd become fond of him and often babysat when I had work obligations. "Good luck today, dear," she said, squeezing my hand. "That boy is lucky to have you. I know he'll be fine with you. He might sing some commercials, that's his new thing." She smiled. "I'd love to hear him sing." Love. I walked into the courthouse feeling more confident than I'd expected. I knew I was doing the right thing. Mom was already there with her own lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in an expensive suit who was probably costing more than Mom's monthly income, which made me wonder where the money was coming from until I realized Mom was likely using Danny's benefit money to pay for legal representation. The irony was staggering. She was using Danny's disability benefits to fight against Danny's best interests. All rise for the Honorable Judge Martinez. Judge Martinez was a woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She reviewed the case file briefly, then looked up at both parties. "This is an emergency guardianship petition for Daniel Morrison, age 17, with autism. The petitioner is his sister, Amy Morrison, and the respondent is his mother, Linda Morrison. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," we both said. "Ms. Morrison, Amy Morrison, you filed a comprehensive petition alleging abandonment, neglect, and financial impropriety. Can you summarize your primary concerns?" I stood up, my hands surprisingly steady. "Your Honor, 3 months ago, my mother left my brother at my apartment with 2 bags of clothes and told me, 'He's your burden now.' Since then, she's refused to provide any assistance with his care while continuing to collect over $1,500 monthly in benefits designated for his support. And you have documentation of this?" "Yes, Your Honor. Medical records showing missed appointments, evidence of my out-of-pocket expenses for his medications and care, and photographs documenting his physical condition when he was placed with me. I also have video evidence of his remarkable improvement under my care." Judge Martinez turned to Mom's lawyer. "Ms. Patterson, how does your client respond to these allegations?" Mom's lawyer stood with practiced confidence. "Your Honor, my client is a recently widowed woman who was overwhelmed by grief and asked her daughter to temporarily care for Daniel while she dealt with her husband's estate and emotional recovery. This was never intended as abandonment, but rather as a family support system during a difficult time. And the continued collection of benefits? My client remained legally responsible for Daniel's care and continued to provide financial support through the benefit system. She maintains that this arrangement was working well for all parties until her daughter decided to pursue unnecessary legal action. I had to admire the spin, but I also knew it was complete nonsense." "Your Honor," I said, "if I may address that directly?" Judge Martinez nodded. "I have documentation showing that I called my mother 17 times and sent 12 text messages over a 3-week period requesting assistance with my brother's medical care, insurance transfers, and appointment scheduling. She didn't respond to a single attempt at communication." I handed the judge a folder containing printed phone logs and screenshots. "Furthermore, my brother was receiving regular therapy services that were discontinued when he came to live with me, not because they weren't needed, but because my mother prevented me from accessing information about his care schedule." Judge Martinez reviewed the documentation silently. When she looked up, her expression had shifted. "Ms. Patterson, can your client explain why she didn't respond to requests for assistance with Daniel's medical care?" A whispered conference between Mom and her lawyer. "Your Honor, my client was dealing with complex estate issues and assumed her daughter was managing Daniel's care adequately. Without access to his medical records or benefit accounts," another whispered conference, "we maintain that the communication breakdown was mutual and that arrangements could have been made if Ms. Morrison had been more patient with her mother's grieving process. That's when I knew we were going to win. Your Honor, I'd like to present evidence of my brother's condition and progress." Judge Martinez nodded. "Proceed." I opened my second folder, hands steady despite the magnitude of what I was about to reveal. These photographs were taken the day my brother arrived at my apartment. I handed the judge images of Danny's bruises, his underweight frame, his withdrawn posture, and these were taken last week. The contrast was undeniable. The recent photos showed a healthier, happier child. Danny smiling at the camera. Danny eating a full meal. Danny engaged in activities instead of just existing. Dr. Peterson's medical report documents an 8-pound weight gain and significant improvement in social engagement over the past month, I continued. She's prepared to testify that my brother is thriving in his current placement. Mom's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Your Honor, she interjected, my client disputes the characterization of those initial photographs and maintains that any bruising was self-inflicted during behavioral episodes. Judge Martinez studied the photos carefully. Ms. Patterson, these appear to be grip marks, not self-inflicted injuries. We respectfully disagree with that assessment. I reached for my phone. Your Honor, I have a video I'd like to show you. It was from 3 days ago. Danny in our kitchen helping me make dinner. He was singing the "I'd like to buy the world a Coke" jingle while stirring pasta, asking questions about ingredients, completely comfortable and engaged. This is my brother now, I said as the video played. Happy, healthy, communicative. He's gone from being completely nonverbal to singing and speaking clearly. The difference is remarkable. When the video ended, Judge Martinez was quiet for a long moment. Ms. Patterson, I'm going to ask your client to explain the benefit collection issue directly. Mom stood up, clearly nervous. Your Honor, I was still Daniel's legal guardian. I was still responsible for his care. But you weren't providing care. Ms. Morrison was. How do you justify collecting benefits for care you weren't providing? I was planning to resume care once I got back on my feet. Over 3 months later, while your son missed medical appointments and was denied access to prescribed medications, it's been a difficult adjustment period. I needed time to figure out my life without my husband. Danny's care was overwhelming me. I thought Amy could handle it better temporarily. Judge Martinez leaned forward. Ms. Morrison, Linda Morrison, are you currently receiving disability payments, food assistance, and housing credits for Daniel's care? Yes, but while your daughter pays out of pocket for his medications, medical appointments, and daily expenses, Mom's face went pale. She never asked me for money. According to the documentation, she contacted you 17 times requesting assistance with his care coordination. That was different. That was about paperwork, not money. I stood up. Your Honor, may I clarify something? Please. I wasn't asking for money. I was asking for access to my brother's existing benefits and services so I could provide adequate care. My mother prevented me from accessing his medical insurance, his therapy appointments, his medication prescriptions. She forced me to start over with new providers and pay out of pocket while she continued collecting the benefits intended for his support. The courtroom was completely silent. Judge Martinez reviewed her notes. Ms. Patterson, how does your client justify maintaining control of benefits while preventing access to services? Another whispered conference between Mom and her lawyer. Your Honor, there was clearly a miscommunication about the temporary nature of this arrangement. For 3 months? During which time a disabled minor missed medical appointments and was denied access to prescribed medications while his guardian collected benefits for care she wasn't providing? Mom's lawyer had no good answer for that. Judge Martinez turned to me. Ms. Morrison, what are you requesting from this court? Immediate emergency guardianship of my brother Daniel, with full access to his benefits and services. I want to ensure he receives consistent medical care and support while we pursue permanent guardianship. And if the court grants emergency guardianship, what are your plans for Daniel's long-term care? I've already established relationships with new medical providers. Dr. Peterson has recommended therapy services that accept his insurance. I've researched day programs and vocational training for adults with disabilities since he'll be aging out of his current school soon. My plan is to provide stable, loving care while supporting his development and helping him reach his full potential. Judge Martinez looked at Mom. Ms. Morrison, what is your position on your daughter's request? Mom stood up again, and for a moment, she looked like the broken widow she was claiming to be. Your Honor, I love my son. I never intended for things to get so complicated. Maybe Amy is better equipped to handle his daily care right now. I blinked in surprise. She was conceding. But I want visitation rights, she continued. I want to be part of his life. Judge Martinez made notes. Ms. Morrison, Amy Morrison, would you be amenable to supervised visitation? I thought about Danny's reaction when I'd mentioned Mom earlier. The fear in his voice when he asked if she was going to come get him. Your Honor, I'd be open to visitation if and when my brother expresses a desire to see his mother, and only under conditions that prioritize his emotional well-being. Meaning, supervised visits in a neutral location, with the understanding that if he becomes distressed or asks to leave, the visit ends immediately. Mom started to protest, but her lawyer put a hand on her arm. Judge Martinez reviewed her notes once more. I'm prepared to make a ruling. Based on the evidence presented, I'm granting emergency guardianship to Amy Morrison, effective immediately. I felt my knees go weak with relief. However, the judge continued, this is temporary guardianship pending a full evaluation. A social worker will conduct home visits and interviews over the next 60 days. If the evaluation supports permanent guardianship, we'll proceed accordingly. She looked directly at Mom. Ms. Morrison, You are ordered to immediately transfer all benefit accounts and medical records to your daughter. You have 48 hours to complete this process. Mom nodded, tears streaming down her face. Court is adjourned. As people started filing out, Mom approached me. Amy, I'm sorry. I really am. I couldn't handle it all after your father died. I felt trapped. I looked at her for a long moment. Mom, feeling trapped doesn't excuse neglect, and it definitely doesn't excuse fraud. I know. I'll transfer everything tonight. I wanted to feel victorious, but mostly I just felt exhausted. I had won the battle, but I still had 60 days to prove I deserved to win the war. The victory felt hollow until I picked up Danny from Mrs. Patterson's house. How did it go? He asked as soon as I walked through her door. Good news, buddy. You get to stay with me. His whole face lit up, and he started singing the Happy Days theme song, something he'd been working on all week. Sunday, Monday, happy days. Mrs. Patterson squeezed my hand as we left. That boy belongs with you, she said quietly. Anyone can see it. That evening, I sat Danny down to explain what came next. A social worker is going to come visit us, I told him. She'll want to see your room, talk to you about how you're feeling, make sure you're happy and healthy. Are you worried? I considered lying, giving him a reassuring answer. But Danny deserved honesty. A little, but not because I think we're doing anything wrong. I'm worried because sometimes adults make decisions that don't make sense. He nodded seriously. Like when Mom left me here? Yeah, like that. I like it here, he said simply, then started humming the Oscar Mayer song. You don't get angry when I arrange my things. You remember that I don't like loud noises. You make sure I have my elephant at bedtime. It struck me that Danny's standards for good care were heartbreakingly simple. Basic respect, routine, and a stuffed animal. The fact that these things hadn't been provided before made my chest tight with anger. 3 days later, Mom followed through on the court order. She arrived at my apartment with a cardboard box containing Danny's medical records, insurance cards, and benefit paperwork. She looked awful. Red-eyed, thinner than I remembered, wearing clothes that seemed too big for her. Here's everything, she said, not meeting my eyes. I took the box and set it on the counter. Mom, are you okay? She laughed bitterly. Am I okay? I just lost custody of my son. You gave up custody when you dropped him off and walked away. I thought I just needed time. I thought you'd understand that I was drowning. I leaned against the counter, studying her face. Help me understand now. What was your plan? How long did you think you could keep collecting his benefits while I did all the work? She was quiet for a long moment. I wasn't thinking long term. I was just trying to survive each day. The money helped keep the house, kept food on the table. And honestly, for the first time in years, I felt free. No daily school runs, no meltdowns to manage, no constant vigilance. You could have asked for help. You could have been honest about struggling instead of dumping Danny and cutting off contact. I was ashamed. Her voice cracked. Your father handled everything with Danny. All his appointments, his medications, dealing with his episodes. I never learned how to do it alone. And after he died, I was so overwhelmed I started resenting Danny for needing so much. So you hurt him instead of admitting you needed support. She flinched. I lost my temper sometimes when he wouldn't respond or when he'd have meltdowns. I grabbed his arms too hard, trying to calm him down. I know it was wrong. At least she was admitting it. That was something. Mom, Danny is doing really well now. He's talking again. He's happy. He's healthy. But he's also afraid of you. I know. I could see it in court. If you want to be part of his life eventually, you need to get help. Therapy, grief counseling, something. You can't just expect him to forget what happened. She nodded, wiping her eyes. I've already called a therapist. I have an appointment next week. Good. That's a start. After she left, I found Danny in his room, organizing his art supplies with more intensity than usual. He did this when he was anxious. Was that Mom? He asked without looking up. Yeah, she brought your medical records and insurance information. Is she angry? She's sad, but not angry at you. She's sad because she made mistakes and now she has to live with the consequences. Danny lined up his crayons in perfect rows. Do you think she'll get better? It was such a mature question from someone who'd been through so much. I don't know, Danny, but it's not your job to worry about that. Your job is to focus on being happy and healthy. He nodded and continued his organizing. After a few minutes, he started singing quietly. When you wish upon a star, makes no difference who you are. That's a beautiful song, Danny. I'm glad I live here now, he said, still singing softly. Me too, buddy. 2 weeks later, the social worker arrived for her first visit. Ms. Williams was a woman in her 40s with a warm smile and observant eyes. She spent an hour touring the apartment, reviewing Danny's medical records, and asking detailed questions about our routines. Danny seems very comfortable here, she noted, watching him show her his art collection while humming the theme from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. We've developed good routines. He knows what to expect each day, which helps with his anxiety. And he started communicating so much more. I can see that. His verbal progress is remarkable. I showed her the benefit transfer confirmations, Danny's new insurance cards, and scheduled appointments with his therapy team. Everything's been transferred successfully. He has his first appointment with a new behavioral specialist next week. Ms. Williams interviewed Danny privately, asking about his daily routine, his feelings about living with me, and whether he felt safe and cared for. When she emerged from his room, Danny was singing, "You Are My Sunshine," loud enough for me to hear in the kitchen. "He's thriving," she said. "The difference between his initial medical reports and his current condition is remarkable. You've done excellent work. It's not work when you love someone," she smiled. "That's exactly the right attitude. I'll be back in 2 weeks for my follow-up visit, but I don't anticipate any issues." That night, Danny and I celebrated with ice cream and a movie. As we sat on the couch, he leaning against my side while he sang along to the Disney songs, I realized something had fundamentally shifted. This wasn't temporary anymore. This wasn't a crisis I was managing. This was our life, our family, our new normal. And it was better than anything either of us had before. The second social worker visit went even better than the first. Ms. Williams arrived on a Thursday afternoon to find Danny in the kitchen helping me make dinner while singing "Be Our Guest" from Beauty and the Beast. He was carefully measuring rice while chattering about his day at the community center program I'd enrolled him in. "Hi, Ms. Williams," he said cheerfully when she walked in. "We're making stir-fry. Do you want to see my new art project?" I painted it while listening to music. I caught Ms. Williams's expression surprise and delight at Danny's confidence and social engagement. This was a far cry from the withdrawn, anxious boy described in his initial reports. She spent 2 hours with us, observing our dinner routine, reviewing Danny's progress in his new therapy program, and conducting another private interview with him. From the kitchen, I could hear Danny singing softly to himself during their conversation, Hakuna Matata, and then transitioning into the jingle for Subway. Music had become his way of staying calm and expressing joy. "Amy," she said as she prepared to leave, "I'm going to recommend approval for permanent guardianship. Danny is clearly thriving in your care." I felt a wave of relief so intense it was almost dizzying. "Thank you." The final hearing is scheduled for next month. Unless something unexpected happens, this should be a formality. 2 weeks later, something unexpected did happen, but not in the way I'd feared. Detective Johnson with the Fraud Investigation Unit called me. "Ms. Morrison, we need to speak with you about your mother's benefit claims." My stomach dropped, but I agreed to meet with him the following afternoon. The detective explained that the investigation had been triggered automatically when Danny's benefits were transferred. When benefit accounts are transferred due to guardianship changes, it flags our system for review, he said. In your mother's case, the duration and amount of potential fraudulent claims warranted a formal investigation. He asked detailed questions about the timeline of events, Danny's living situation, and the financial arrangements. I answered honestly, providing copies of all the documentation I'd gathered for the guardianship case. "Ms. Morrison, based on our preliminary investigation, your mother may have fraudulently collected approximately $9,000 in benefits over a 6-month period while not providing care." The number hit me like a physical blow. $9,000. What happens now? We'll complete our investigation and determine whether to file charges. If charges are filed, she could face fines, restitution requirements, and possible jail time. I left the police station feeling sick. I'd wanted Mom to face consequences for what she'd done, but the reality of criminal charges felt overwhelming. That evening, I called Lisa for advice. "Amy, this investigation isn't your fault," she said. "Benefit fraud is a serious crime that hurts everyone who legitimately needs assistance. The system has to pursue these cases. But what if she goes to jail? That's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to Danny, and you've handled that perfectly." When I got home, Danny was in the living room working on a puzzle while singing "Somewhere Over the Rainbow." He looked up when I walked in. "You look sad," he said. "Are you okay?" I sat down beside him. "I'm okay, buddy. Just had a long day. Do you want to sing with me? Music makes everything better." "What should we sing?" He thought for a moment, then started, "You've Got a Friend in Me." I joined in, and for a few minutes we just sat there singing together. It was exactly what I needed. The final hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. Judge Martinez smiled when she saw Danny in the courtroom. He'd asked to come, wanting to be part of the decision about his future. "Hello, Daniel. How are you doing?" "Good," Danny said clearly, then quietly sang a few bars of "Happy and You Know It." "I can see that. You look very happy and healthy." The hearing itself was brief. Ms. Williams presented her recommendation. Mom's lawyer formally withdrew any objection to permanent guardianship. I answered a few questions about my long-term plans for Danny's care. Based on all evidence presented and the clear improvement in Daniel's well-being, I'm granting permanent guardianship to Amy Morrison, Judge Martinez announced. Danny squeezed my hand. However, the judge continued, looking at both Danny and me, I want to remind you both that this guardianship is designed to support Daniel's growth toward independence. Amy, your role is to help prepare him for as much autonomy as possible while providing the support he needs. Yes, Your Honor. That's exactly what we're working toward. Daniel, do you understand that Amy is legally responsible for your care now? Yes, and I'm learning to take care of myself too. Judge Martinez smiled. Perfect. Court is adjourned. As we walked out of the courthouse, Danny looked up at me. So it's official now? It's official. You're stuck with me. He grinned. Good. That evening, we celebrated with dinner at his favorite restaurant. As I watched him confidently order his own meal and chat with the server while humming the restaurant's jingle under his breath, I marveled at the transformation that had occurred over the past few months. Danny was becoming the person he was always meant to be: confident, communicative, and secure in his place in the world. And I was becoming the person I was meant to be too. Not just his caregiver, but his advocate, his family, and his biggest supporter. The journey wasn't over, but we were building something beautiful together. A week later, I got a call that Mom had been formally charged with benefit fraud. She would be sentenced the following month. But that night, as I listened to Danny singing "Here Comes the Sun" in his room, I realized that our story wasn't about Mom's mistakes anymore. It was about the family we'd built together and the future we were creating. 3 months after the final hearing, I got a call that put everything into perspective. Ms. Morrison? This is Detective Johnson. I wanted to update you on your mother's case. Mom had pled guilty to benefit fraud that morning. She was sentenced to 6 months of home confinement, 2 years of probation, and full restitution of the fraudulent claims. How much restitution? I asked. $9,000 plus penalties and interest. It comes to just over $12,000 total. The judge had also ordered her to complete counseling and community service at a program that helped families with special needs children. She seemed relieved it was over, Detective Johnson said. Her lawyer mentioned she's been in therapy and volunteering already. I hung up feeling a complex mix of emotions. Justice, yes, but also sadness that it had come to this. Danny was in the living room when I got off the phone singing "Imagine" while working on a puzzle. He'd heard enough of the conversation to understand what had happened. Is Mom in trouble? He asked without looking up from his puzzle. She has to stay home for 6 months except for work and appointments, and she has to pay back all the money she took that was supposed to be for your care. Is she going to jail? No. She gets to stay in her own house, but she can't leave except for important things. Danny was quiet for a moment, then said something that amazed me. I'm sad that she made bad choices, but I'm glad she has to make it right. His emotional maturity continued to astound me. Despite everything he'd been through, Danny was capable of empathy, even for someone who'd hurt him. Meanwhile, our life had settled into a wonderful rhythm. Danny had gotten a part-time job at an art supply store through a program for young adults with disabilities. He was 18 now, and the independence gave him incredible confidence. Danny's one of our best workers, his supervisor told me during a check-in. He's reliable, enthusiastic, and customers love how knowledgeable he is about art materials. The job gave Danny purpose and pride. He'd come home singing jingles he'd heard on the store radio, excited to tell me about customers he'd helped find the perfect supplies for their projects. He was also taking community college art classes and had started talking about maybe teaching art to other people with disabilities someday. I want to help people like me, he told me one evening while organizing his ever-growing art collection. Art makes me happy, and music makes me happy. Maybe I can help other people find what makes them happy too. That's a wonderful goal, Danny. 3 months later, something unexpected happened. Mom called me. Amy, I know this might be presumptuous, but I wondered if I could send Danny something. I've been working on a project that I think he might like. I was curious despite myself. What kind of project? I've been volunteering with a group that makes sensory kits for children with autism. I made one specifically thinking about Danny's preferences, his favorite colors, textures that might be calming. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I wanted him to know I've been learning. The package arrived a week later. Inside was a carefully assembled kit with soft blue and green fabrics, stress balls in different textures, and small fidget toys that were clearly chosen with thought and care. There was also a letter. Dear Danny, I've been learning about autism and sensory needs through my volunteer work. I made this kit thinking about what might help you feel calm and happy. I hope it's useful. I'm proud of your job at the art store and your college classes. You're becoming such an amazing young man. Love, Mom. Danny examined each item carefully, testing the textures and organizing them by preference while humming, "What a wonderful world." She remembered that I like soft things, he said quietly. Do you want to write back? Yes. But I want to tell her about my job and my art classes. I want her to know I'm doing good things. That evening, Danny wrote a letter, longer than any he'd written before. He told Mom about his favorite projects at work, the art classes he was taking, and his goals for the future. I'm learning to help customers find art supplies that make them happy, he wrote. It's like music, you have to find the right combination that sounds good together. Mom's response came quickly, full of genuine pride and encouragement. She shared details about her volunteer work and asked thoughtful questions about his art. They began corresponding regularly, with Mom always following Danny's lead on frequency and topics. Never pushing, never demanding more than he was willing to give. 2 months later, Danny surprised me. Amy, I think I might want to see Mom. Not alone, and not at her house, but maybe somewhere neutral, with you there. I studied his face carefully. What's making you feel ready now? Her letters. She sounds different, like she's really learning. And I'm different too. I'm not scared of her anymore. What would you want from a visit? I want to tell her about my job and my art program. I want her to see that I'm okay. And I want to understand why she did what she did. Those are good reasons. Do you want me to set something up? Yes. But I want to pick the place. Somewhere I feel comfortable. We arranged to meet Mom at the community center where Danny took his art classes. Neutral territory where he felt confident and secure. The reunion was awkward at first. Mom looked older, more fragile than I remembered. She'd lost weight and her hair was graying, but her eyes were clearer than they'd been in years. Hi, Danny, she said softly. Hi, Mom, he replied, then started humming, Yesterday, under his breath, his way of managing nervousness. They sat across from each other at a picnic table while I stayed close enough to intervene if needed, but far enough away to give them privacy. I watched Danny show her photos of his artwork, explain his job responsibilities, and describe his classes. He was confident and articulate, his words punctuated by soft humming when he needed to gather his thoughts. You've grown up so much, Mom said, and I could hear the regret in her voice. I had good help, Danny replied, glancing at me while humming, You've got a friend. Amy did an amazing job with you. Better than I ever did. You could have done better if you'd gotten help instead of giving up. It was a direct statement, but not said with cruelty. Danny was simply stating facts while humming the truth under his breath. You're right. I made terrible choices when I should have asked for support. They talked for another hour, covering difficult topics with more honesty than I'd expected. Danny asked direct questions about the abuse, the neglect, and the financial fraud. Mom answered without making excuses or deflecting blame. As we prepared to leave, Danny made a decision that surprised all of us. Mom, I'd like to have dinner with you sometime, at our apartment. I want you to see how we live now. Mom's eyes filled with tears. I'd like that very much. It wasn't forgiveness, exactly, but it was something more complex and mature, an acknowledgement that people could change, that relationships could be rebuilt on new foundations. As we drove home, Danny was quiet for a long time, humming Let It Be softly. How do you feel about seeing her? I asked. Sad and hopeful at the same time. Sad about what happened, but hopeful that maybe she really is getting better. That's a very wise way to look at it. Amy? Yeah? Thank you for not giving up on me, and for not making me choose between loving you and loving her. I had to pull over because my vision was blurry with tears. Danny had taught me something profound about grace, forgiveness, and the complicated nature of family love. We were building something new together, not replacing what was broken, but creating something stronger and healthier than what came before. 4 months after Mom's sentencing, she reached out to me again. Amy, I know this might be presumptuous, but I wondered if I could send Danny a birthday card. He's turning 19 next month. I was surprised by the request. Mom had respected our boundaries completely since our first meeting at the community center. I'll ask him, I said. If he's okay with it, you can send it here. That evening, I mentioned Mom's request to Danny. He was in his room, singing along to music while organizing his art supplies. He'd been accepted into an advanced drawing program and was more excited about art than I'd ever seen him. She wants to send you a birthday card. No pressure to respond or anything, just acknowledgement of your birthday. Danny considered this while arranging his new colored pencils and humming Happy Birthday under his breath. Can I read it before I decide if I want to write back? Of course. Then it's okay. The card arrived 3 days before Danny's birthday. It was simple, a landscape photograph that matched his aesthetic preferences, with a handwritten note inside. Dear Danny, I hope you're doing well and that your 19th birthday is everything you want it to be. I'm proud of the progress you've made and the young man you've become. I'm working hard to become someone better, someone who could support families instead of hurting them. I love you and miss you, Mom. Danny read it twice, then set it on his dresser without comment. But I noticed he started humming Count on Me by Bruno Mars, a song about being there for someone. On his birthday, we had a small celebration with Mrs. Patterson and a few friends from his art program. Danny had specifically requested that we keep it low-key. Large groups still made him anxious, though he was much better with social situations than before. After everyone left, Danny surprised me. I want to write a letter to Mom. Okay, do you want help with it? No, I think I need to do it myself. He spent an hour at the kitchen table, writing carefully in his precise handwriting while humming Bridge Over Troubled Water. When he finished, he handed me the letter to read. Dear Mom, thank you for the birthday card. I am doing well. I am taking art classes and working at the art store. Amy takes good care of me, and I feel safe and happy. I hope you are getting better and that you learned from your mistakes. I'm ready to see you again if you want to have dinner with us. I still love you even though I'm disappointed in what you did. Danny. I felt tears prick my eyes. The letter was mature, honest, and incredibly gracious given everything that had happened. This is beautiful, Danny. Very thoughtful. I practiced it in my head while singing. Music helps me think about feelings. We mailed the letter the next day. A week later, Mom responded with a longer letter. She thanked Danny for his kindness, acknowledged the hurt she'd caused, and shared details about her therapy progress and volunteer work. I'm learning about autism and special needs support through my volunteer work, she wrote. I understand now how badly I failed you, and I'm working to become someone who could support families instead of hurting them. She didn't ask for anything, no immediate visit, no phone calls, no rushed forgiveness, just an acknowledgement that she was working to become better. Danny and Mom exchanged a few more letters over the following months. Short, careful communications that allowed them to maintain connection without pressure. 2 months later, we had our first dinner together at our apartment. Mom arrived exactly on time, carrying a small bouquet of flowers from her garden. She looked healthier than she had at the community center, more at peace with herself. Danny had spent the afternoon cooking, he'd become quite good at it, and took pride in preparing meals for special occasions. Hi, Mom, he said when he answered the door, humming the welcome song he'd made up. Hi, Danny. Something smells wonderful. Dinner conversation was tentative at first, but it flowed more easily as the evening progressed. Mom asked thoughtful questions about Danny's work and art classes. Danny shared his latest projects and sang a few bars of songs that reminded him of different emotions. Your artwork is incredible, Mom said, examining the drawings he'd hung on the refrigerator. Have you thought about entering any of these in competitions? Actually, my teacher thinks I should apply to show some pieces at the community gallery, Danny said proudly. I'd love to see that show if you decide to do it. Really? Really, I'm proud of what you've accomplished. As Mom prepared to leave, she pulled me aside for a private conversation. Amy, I know I've said this before, but I need to say it again. What you did for Danny, how you fought for him when I failed him. It's the most important thing anyone has ever done for our family. Mom, you don't need to keep thanking me. Yes, I do, because I need you to understand that I see it. I see how happy he is, how confident he's become, how much he's grown. That's because of you. It's because of both of us now. You're a good support system for him these days. She smiled at the description. We'd never quite figured out how to label her role in his life. Now she wasn't his primary caregiver anymore, but she was family. He's teaching me how to love someone properly, she said. How to support without controlling, how to care without overwhelming. After Mom left, Danny and I cleaned up the kitchen together. I'm proud of how that went, he said as he dried dishes, humming Proud of You quietly. It felt normal. It did. You've both worked really hard to get to this point. Amy? Yeah? Do you ever regret it? Taking me in, fighting Mom, all the legal stuff? I stopped washing dishes and turned to look at him. At 19, Danny had grown into a thoughtful, articulate young man who managed his responsibilities, held down a job, maintained healthy relationships, and was working toward goals that excited him. Danny, taking care of you has been the most rewarding thing I've ever done. Not just because of who you've become, but because of who it helped me become. What do you mean? Before all this happened, I was just drifting through life, working, paying bills, existing. But fighting for you taught me what I was capable of. It taught me what really matters. He nodded thoughtfully, then started humming Beautiful Boy, while putting away the last of the dishes. I think Mom had to lose me to figure out how to love me properly. That's very wise. And I think I had to go through all the bad stuff to appreciate the good stuff, like how music sounds better after silence. That night, I fell asleep to the sound of Danny singing softly in his room, Here Comes the Sun, and I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we had built something beautiful and unbreakable together. 1 year later, I stood in the kitchen of our apartment watching Danny prepare dinner for 3 people. Amy, can you check if the chicken is done? He called from the stove, humming the cooking with love jingle he'd made up. I looked over his shoulder at the perfectly golden pieces. Looks perfect. Mom's going to be here in 10 minutes. Do you think she'll like the salad? Danny, you've cooked for her a dozen times now. She always loves everything you make. He smiled, but I could see the nervous energy that still appeared whenever Mom visited. Some things took time to fully heal. He started humming, "Everything's Gonna Be All Right," his go-to song for managing anxiety. The dynamic between Danny and Mom had evolved slowly over the past year. Regular dinners at our apartment, supervised outings to art shows and community events, phone calls where they talked about his work and her volunteer activities. Mom had kept every promise she'd made. She'd completed her home confinement, maintained regular therapy appointments, and built a stable life centered around helping other families navigate special needs care. She'd also paid back every dollar of the fraudulent benefits, plus penalties and interest. It had taken her 10 months of working multiple part-time jobs, but she'd insisted on making full restitution. "I need to own what I did completely," she'd told me. "Not just legally, but morally." The doorbell rang, and Danny wiped his hands on his apron before answering it, humming "Hello" by Lionel Richie. "Hi, Mom, come in." "Something smells wonderful," Mom said, hugging him briefly. The physical affection was still tentative, but it was genuine. She'd brought a small bouquet of flowers from her garden, another ritual that had developed over time. "Danny, your latest drawings are incredible. Have you thought about putting together a portfolio for that gallery downtown?" "Actually, yeah. Amy helped me research their submission process. I'm thinking about applying for their Emerging Artists program." "That's wonderful. I'd love to help you prepare your application if you'd like." Dinner conversation flowed easily now, covering Danny's promotion to assistant manager at the art store, his plans to take more college classes, and Mom's new position training other volunteers at the community center. "How are the families you're working with?" I asked. Challenging, but rewarding. "Yesterday, I helped a single mother understand her son's sensory needs and set up better routines at home. It reminded me how lost I felt when your father died and I didn't know how to handle Danny's needs alone." "But you're helping other people avoid those mistakes?" "Exactly. I can't change what I did, but I can use what I learned to help other families." After dinner, Danny showed Mom his latest project, a series of drawings that depicted different emotions through abstract color and line combinations, each inspired by a different song. "This one is forgiveness," he said, pointing to a piece that blended soft blues and warm golds. "It's not just one feeling. It's complicated, like harmony in music." Mom studied the drawing for a long time. "It's beautiful, Danny. And you're right, forgiveness is very complicated. I'm working on one called Family next. It's going to have lots of different colors that don't seem like they should go together, but they do when you find the right rhythm." I felt my throat tighten with emotion. Danny's ability to process complex feelings through his art and music never ceased to amaze me. As Mom prepared to leave, she pulled me aside for a private conversation. "Amy, I know I've said this before, but I need to say it again. What you did for Danny, how you fought for him when I failed him, it's the most important thing anyone has ever done for our family." "Mom, you don't need to keep thanking me." "Yes, I do. Because I need you to understand that I see it. I see how happy he is, how confident he's become, how much he's grown. That's because of you. It's because of both of us now. You're a good support system for him these days." She smiled at the description. We'd never quite figured out how to label her role in his life now she wasn't his primary caregiver anymore, but she was family. "He's teaching me how to love someone properly," she said. "How to support without controlling, how to care without overwhelming." After Mom left, Danny and I cleaned up the kitchen together. "I'm proud of how that went," he said as he dried dishes, humming "Proud of You" quietly. "It felt normal." "It did. You've both worked really hard to get to this point." "Amy? Yeah? Do you ever regret it? Taking me in, fighting Mom, all the legal stuff?" I stopped washing dishes and turned to look at him. At 20, Danny had grown into a thoughtful, articulate young man who managed his responsibilities, held down a good job, maintained healthy relationships, and was working toward goals that excited him. "Danny, taking care of you has been the most rewarding thing I've ever done. Not just because of who you've become, but because of who it helped me become." "What do you mean?" "Before all this happened, I was just drifting through life, working, paying bills, existing. But fighting for you taught me what I was capable of. It taught me what really matters." He nodded thoughtfully, then started humming "Beautiful Boy," while putting away the last of the dishes. "I think Mom had to lose me to figure out how to love me properly. That's very wise. And I think I had to go through all the bad stuff to appreciate the good stuff. like how music sounds better after silence. As I drove home from work the next evening, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this point. What had started as an emergency had become the foundation for a new kind of family. Danny had learned that he deserved love, respect, and support. Mom had learned that loving someone meant putting their needs above your own convenience. And I had learned that sometimes the most important battles are fought not for yourself, but for someone who can't fight for themselves. The fraud case was long closed. The court proceedings were forgotten. But the transformation that had resulted from that crisis continued to ripple through all our lives. Danny was thriving in his growing independence while staying connected to family. Mom was channeling her experience into helping others. And I had discovered a purpose that gave meaning to every day. Sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the most important victories. Sometimes the people who hurt us can learn to love us better. And sometimes the most broken families can rebuild themselves into something stronger than they ever were before. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories about family justice and finding strength in the most unexpected places. What would you have done in my situation? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and remember, sometimes the best way to heal from betrayal is to focus on building something better than what was broken. That night, I fell asleep to the sound of Danny singing softly in his room, "Here Comes the Sun," and I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we had built something beautiful and unbreakable together.